For the artists, for the passionate. Welcome to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast, or welcome if it's your first time. I am your host Jade Black, and today I'm continuing on with my different sectors of society type series, and I'm talking about the sciences. Because this is something that is very different to our world, and I really wanted to shed a light on it. Sciences go by slightly different names, but they encompass really pretty much all of the same stuff. There's anatomy, there's mechanics, there's chemistry, and there's maths. So a few things so I want to talk about the status of practitioners, because again, this is so completely different. It's very much the bro, get a real job. It's very much if you say to someone, oh yeah, I'm a scientist, they'll tell you to just get a real fucking job. Like, what are you doing with your life? You're spending your life researching chemistry? Are you fucking joking? That's what you're doing with your life? The only real exception to this is doctors. Doctors are fine, because, you know, they're actually doing something. But even so, a lot of people don't really like doctors that much because, as is true in our world, a lot of doctors really aren't that great at their job, so people won't tell you to get a real job, but they'll be like, oh well, I hope you're a good one. I hope you actually, do that job. So yeah, people aren't friendly to sciences. And the state of the sciences very much reflects this. They don't really get funding. Like, funding for science is just not really a thing. Personnel-wise, they're massively understaffed for what they want to do, because nobody wants to go into that, because you'll just be told to get a real job, there's no money. It's not something that people are massively interested in. Recruitment is incredibly difficult. And a lot of this does stem from the Great Burning and Emperor Taro just being like, well, this is not important. What matters more is our art and our culture, and, for the most part we're fine. So just, like, we got to prioritise something. The science has got the short end of the stick on that one. So let's go through these sciences. Let's talk about anatomy, which is biology. So yeah, I've touched on doctors a bit before. Doctors really are the only people that are associated with anatomy. They might do some research. As doctors get older, they're moved into slightly more research-oriented roles with, what they have access to. But, I mean, there's like, a lot of people in today's society are, like, there's an issue in our society with people donating bodies to science, because sometimes you need that, particularly for anatomy and research and all that, and that's, they're claiming they don't have enough of those. But that is actually a real issue there for, doctors trying to do research, is that literally nobody fucking does this. It would never cross anybody's mind to do that, so. But doctors very much have the, well, I guess you're doing something to, like, contribute to society, provided you're a good doctor. If you talk to somebody about that, nurses actually get a better rep than doctors a lot of the time, because it's, actual patient care a lot of the time. It's doing, I guess, a more visible difference. People see that more, so like, oh yeah, decent person. You over there, who the fuck are you? Go away. Mechanics is a slightly weird one, because there's a lot of mechanics involved in things like construction and carpentry and all of those sorts of things, and again, yeah, that's cool, you go ahead and do that, and really this is why Emperor Taro took the stance he did with the sciences in the Great Burning. Is like, well, we've got all the stuff we need to, like, build things, and if anything needs figuring out, well, we've done it once, so we can do it again. It's not that bad. So working in construction is well respected, because, I mean, that's an important job that's especially needed after, you know, the war and things like that. And medical equipment, manufacture of medical equipment, people are like, oh, yeah, well, that's a bit niche, but yeah, I guess that's cool, that's, like, useful, let's just hope the doctors actually use it properly. But otherwise, it's, again, like, if you're trying to research mechanics, research physics and all that, people are like, okay, but remind me again what the point of this is. Like, remind me again why you're doing that. If it's, you know, actively to help construction efforts, okay, sure. Or, like, improve efficiency of things and that, sure, but, like, what are you doing? What is the point of, like, anything else? Just, like, chemistry probably has the single worst reputation of any of the sciences, because again, the whole idea of pharmacies and an amount of pharmaceutical, like, medicine and all of that, people can get behind that. As much as anything, I think people see that as a bit of a necessary evil, but anything beyond that is just, congratulations, you found a new way to explode things, are you proud of yourself? Like, you are literally wasting your time with that. And a lot of the bad rep that chemistry gets really is from illegal chemicals trading and narcotics, because things like, because that's where a lot of chemists do go, because they don't get funding from, you know, nobles or government or anybody else. Like, not like, when it comes to government funding for sciences, like, when it comes to construction and infrastructure and mechanics that way, yeah, there's some funding, and medical equipment, I mean, maybe. But anything else? Like, no. So a lot of pharmacists do end up turning to narcotics and things to try and get money, and yeah, as you'd expect, that doesn't exactly do them well in terms of reputation, because illegal chemicals trading is a massive problem. And a lot of the medicines that are made, and experimental medicines and painkillers and tranquilizers and things like that, because so much of it is involved with narcotics, and narcotics basically equals mercenaries. And even if you're not involved in that, mercenaries are probably just going to assume that you're involved. So a lot of that, even when it's not intended to, gets into places it's not supposed to, and there have been a lot of really bad things that have happened as a result of that. I mean, the methylfluorine thing is very... the whole methylfluorine deal is that was very much a big blow to chemistry, not that it fucking needed one. But yeah, it doesn't go down well. The science that probably has the best reputation is maths with nest, because maths is, you know, a necessary evil for things like economics and a lot of politics and policies and things like that. So maths is something that people respect more, and, you know, a good example of someone who actually does a lot with maths is Hanzo. And when it comes to characters on this, I haven't got a section on notable practitioners, because that just does not exist in the sciences. There's no such thing as a notable scientist in that culture. That's not a thing, and the likelihood that it ever would be a thing is just like basically nil. The closest you can really get is someone like Hanzo, who's just very good at maths and really enjoys it. And he takes advantage to this with economics and politics. Anything beyond like practical maths though, and financial maths, practical maths, again the whole idea is, okay, but how is this useful? Okay, geometry, useful in carpentry, construction, sure. Economics and financial maths, useful, sure. Like, normal numbers, recurring decimals, theoretical maths, nobody gives a shit about that. What do you mean that's going to be useful for anything? Of course it's not. Like, just... Again, people just like, dude, a lot of it comes down to a lot of people just thinking, dude, grow up. Like, you're going to spend your life looking at nonsense numbers that have literally no practical usage, and you're going to dedicate your life to that, grow up. Again, institutions of the sciences just like don't really exist either. It's like the notable science thing. There's nobody to do that. You're very much looking with stuff like this. You kind of, if you ever want funding for this, you're kind of looking for the eccentric billionaire types, and there really aren't very many of those. So there are sort of little informal like associations of like mechanics of Hukai probably exists and stuff like that, but there's really not much to it. And these certainly aren't bodies that have, you know, paid membership or any funding really like consistently tied to them. That's not a thing because nobody gives a shit. I mean, you might get funding awarded to an association if it's, hey, we're doing this very specific medical thing or this very specific construction thing that, you know, we're pretty certain will have an impact. Anything theoretical, we think, oh, well, it might. The answer's just no. Like, if you have some sort of proof that this is really going to help fight infection or help operation survival rates, okay, then we'll listen. But if it's, you know, oh, we might be able to improve the functionality of it, it's like, no. I'm not giving, because, again, science funding is expensive. So it's, okay, well, I could fund this science thing that has 3 people behind it and a big old maybe, or I can do something that actually enriches culture and society and promotes the next generation of artists and writers and things, and yeah, I think I know which one of those I'm prioritising, is generally how it goes down. And the science budget is one of those things that's kind of pertinent in politics with regards to education. The science budget is the one that gets fiddled with all the time. It's the one that's always cut as soon as there's economic strife. Because the sciences are the dustbin subject. It's like, oh yeah, well, they're the ones that people choose to fill out their timetable. You know, if they've got an empty slot, you know, okay, fine, we'll shove anatomy in there and call it good, whatever. And they're all optional besides maths. Maths is the only real exception to this that actually gets an amount of consistent funding because of practicality, because of practical maths and financial maths that is deemed to be, you know, really essential knowledge to, like, exist. And, you know, you might take extra sort of geometry if you want to go into construction, but to be honest, that's more likely to just be learning on the job. But yeah, maths has a more consistent place in education, you know, time set aside for it, and, you know, the funding that you need for maths. But again, maths gets a bit of an easier shtick on this because you don't need as much. It's like, okay, so long as we have worksheets, maybe an abacus or two. Like, okay, but here's a question for you listeners. Hasn't abacus ever helped you do maths? Because I swear to God, I do not understand how those things are useful, as opposed to just counting on your damn fingers. I don't understand it. But you don't need much equipment for maths, generally speaking. Whereas for something like biology or physics, or particularly chemistry, you need a lot of equipment. It's like, yeah, no. How about we just don't do that? Especially with chemistry, because that can very easily be a gateway into narcotics and unsavory characters, unsavory behavior, so that's very, very thorny in schools in particular. That's not really, I don't know, that's like a subject you really get in any school except like the really, really big ones. And even then, that would very much be the half an hour at the end of a Thursday, maybe. The place you're most likely to find this in education is things like woodworking, carpentry classes in schools, or metalwork classes, and there'll be an amount of, geometry that goes into that, and mechanics that goes into that, but again, things like dissection, I bet you remember that from your school days, that is not really a thing in education, and in a lot of nations, this is because of it's just that across a lot of the continent, this is a respect to nature thing. Respect to nature is a really big cultural thing, so the idea of effectively killing an animal just to, like, dissect it in a school is insane. Like, okay, but you're killing an animal for that when you could argue, oh, but it's just the kidneys, or just the this, or just the that, but no, you eat. That's food, that's eating, that's... You're just gonna cut this up on a table in a school and then... Like, that's not really thinkable to people. It's seen as incredibly disrespectful to nature, so that just doesn't happen. Which is good news for the squeamish of you out there. I think really overall with the sciences, they are... I think that's really kind of just a wrap for this episode. The sciences are the bottom of the barrel. They're not looked upon fondly, really, by anyone. They are the laughingstock. They have been, definitely ever since the downfall, but really before that as well. It's never been a society that has prioritized the sciences, and it's very unlikely to ever go that way. Things like art and spiritualism will always take more of a forefront, culture and nature over everything else. That's kind of how that society goes. But that is a wrap for this episode. And if you enjoyed this episode and you want to know when the next one in the series is coming, the best way to stay informed about the podcast is on Instagram. That is the home of the podcast. You'll get advanced notice of what the episode for the week is, soundbite teaser reels, other things, as and when I experiment with them. Keep an eye out for that. That is on my Instagram. That's Jade_Black21. If you want to see how all of this and all the culture and everything impacts my writing, and see that in semi-live updates, you can hit up Twitter for that. That's JadeBlack21. And if you really enjoy world building, all the world building stuff, and you want to see some art associated with that, then you can check out my Pinterest. I'm Jade_Black21 on there. And if you too are a writer and you are published or well on the way, please do get in touch. You can do that via email. I'm jade42black@gmail.com. There's a list of things I want to know in the description. Please read that and include that in your initial email. A couple of things to note: indie and self-pub, you are the people I want to hear from. There's no genre restriction, no age restriction. Doesn't have to be out yet, doesn't have to be a new release, doesn't have to be a novel, poetry, short stories, overview of a trilogy, whatever you want to do. Bring it in. Let's see what we can work out. And until next time, you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a like. It helps the channel a lot. Intro and outro music by me. Copyright JBlack 2024.